in our history of oppression, of struggle, of exclusion, of abuse, and have the lessons that we have learned from that history actually apply to the way that we govern today. Because what we seem to have gone back to is the same logics that we have been struggling for centuries to get out of. So that's what I wanted to say. I'm deeply concerned about this. As I say, I think Uganda is an extreme example that deserves denunciation in the most extreme terms. And I think it's up to the heads of government at this meeting to make it clear that there is such a thing as going beyond the limits of tolerability. There is such a thing as extremism. We have seen descents into murder and into incarceration of people, random incarceration of people in the past. I don't think we can afford to sit by and let this kind of legislation be passed into law that even wants to criminalize people engaging in behaviors in other countries. But at the same time, I think we also have to ask, where did this come from, and what are the roots of this, and how much is this a problem that the entire Commonwealth needs to struggle with, and how much is this something that we're seeing coming up across 3 continents? Thank you.
Now, from the media hordes, we would be willing to accept questions if there are any. Otherwise, we will retire with dignity. Go ahead, Chris.
Do you have any evidence that this bill, private members' bill, has... Sorry. Okay. Do you have any evidence that this private members' bill does indeed have government backing or government blessing?
Stephen, you did some research on that.
Well, certainly the Minister of Ethics and Integrity has come out publicly in support of the bill. When I was going through material last night, I was surprised to see, and I'm sorry that I can't give you the precise cabinet designations, but 2 other senior cabinet ministers have come out in support of the bill. And then at a youth rally a couple of weeks ago, maybe just a week ago in Kampala, President Museveni himself made fun of homosexuality and sort of abused it in the presence of the audience and said things like, we always say Mr. and Mrs. What are we going to do now? Say Mr. and Mr.? He's always given to making mock of these issues. And he went so far as to say that Europeans were coming to Africa to recruit homosexuals. So there is about it a sense that, I mean, the bill may suffer amendments or may be subject to amendment given the pressure that's building internationally, but there is some reason to believe that it has had until now some cabinet approval.
Gary Eliezer Kaitra, News from Guyana. Why do you believe, or expulsion from Commonwealth, why do you believe that that would make a difference? And has anybody from the panel made any representation as it relates to the movers of the bill?
Sorry, I missed the last part.
To the movers of the bill, has anybody from the panel made contact, tried to persuade the movers of the bill?
Okay, on the issue of why expulsion would make a difference, I think CHOGM as an institution has to look to its credibility. If there is nothing that is beyond the pale, if this kind of extreme legislation is considered acceptable by fellow members, then it really questions the value of the Commonwealth institutions as a body, because it means that there's no such thing as too far. So that's why I think the Commonwealth really needs to think seriously about conditions of membership. On the other question of having approached the movers of the bill, I let Basil and Stephen speak for themselves, but certainly there has been no shortage of people who have been addressing this at the local level. There are community groups who've been addressing it. There are religious leaders who have been speaking out against this bill. There are UN officials who have been meeting with government officials in Uganda, and this has been going on for months. So it's not that the people who are moving the bill and who are in Parliament have not been approached about this. The fundamental question is, I think, You know, what are the principles of governance and you know, what, and as you said, what are the principles of membership in the Commonwealth? You know, what's the system of accountability? Stephen was asking, where is the United Nations? The whole point of the United Nations is accountability between nations, among nations, to ensure that the kind of horrors that happened in the Second World War, including the Holocaust, don't happen again. So if a member of the Commonwealth then decides to pass legislation that allows it to literally murder, put to death HIV positive gay people, then you have to ask, you know, what is the function of these international organizations that are supposed to manage conflict and to manage respect for basic human rights and basic dignity of people?
I just, you see, there is a qualitative difference between this private member's bill and any other homophobic, anti-homosexual bill that we know of. The difference lies in many of the clauses, as Robert was saying earlier. This requirement that if you know of the existence of a homosexual or you have reason to believe that someone is homosexual, then you have an obligation to report to the authorities within 24 hours of acquiring the knowledge. And that doesn't matter whether you're in a family or you're in a school or you're in a business or you're an activist or you're a doctor or a nurse. You put yourself at risk and you put the person you intended to reveal at terrible risk. I don't know of any other legislation anywhere which requires that kind of Orwellian interference. And nor do I know of any other bill that says that our local bill will transcend international covenants that we've signed. I don't think there's any other bill that says Ugandans who participate in homosexuality in Trinidad or Canada will be brought back to Uganda and charged and put in jail for their alleged homosexuality outside. So all of those things distinguish the bill from other anti-homosexual bills and the sodomy bills that exist, for example, here in the Caribbean, which isn't to diminish the ugliness of the sodomy bills in the Caribbean, but which is to say that Uganda's gone a step further. What it has done, however, that is just insufferable, just unconscionable, even in those jurisdictions, and there are 6 or 7 in the world that apply the death penalty to homosexuality, as psychotic as that is, this bill applies the death penalty if you're HIV positive. That link has not been made before. And that's what is so unbelievably destructive about the legislation, and why, as Robert says, the Commonwealth, if it's going to have any integrity whatsoever, has to consider the question of suspension, ultimately perhaps the question of exclusion. Yeah. But you can't just let it ride. And by the way, as a footnote to Robert, there's been tremendous discussion in Uganda by the very brave LGBT groups in Uganda. But one of the things that happened recently was that the author of the private member's bill had a public debate with a wonderful human rights lawyer who teaches at Makerere University. Her name is Sylvia Tamale, T-A-M-A-L-E. The debate is found on the internet. She made a very eloquent statement talking about the history of family and sexual orientation in Uganda, and then did an analysis of what's wrong with the bill, which is the best analysis I've read, to tell you the truth.
Could I just add there? You know, this bill, in many ways, crosses new boundaries, and it introduced new things that I don't think any of us have ever seen and will probably see in our lifetime. Because if we're talking about a Commonwealth that prides itself on having some fundamental principles, especially the principles of human rights, and then you get one of the family of the Commonwealth to then say, we will murder anyone who gets sick, which basically what this bill does, yes. Then that really does in no way describes, apart from only one way, describes how horrific this bill is. In what era do we, and when in history, that we've actually put to death people for being sick through a democratic country and a democratic system? The fact that the bill criminalizes activists, because activists knows people living with HIV and AIDS. And in this bill, those people, by order of that bill, are also criminalized. And given that the world, in terms of activism, the World AIDS Conference and all of those conferences that you have in the world are one world in terms of activism on HIV and AIDS, it therefore, by virtue of the nature that it criminalizes the activate in Uganda, it criminalizes all of us who are activating in